Okay, part 3, we're going to look at memes and GIFs. So a key thinker in the analysis of the rise of the internet has been Dana Boyd. Her work's been really highly cited and very, very influential. In particular, her concept of the internet as a networked public has been useful for thinking about the way that the information is made and spread, just generally, I suppose. And I'm going to talk about memes as a kind of specific version of that in a sec. Boyd had kind of 4 factors of a network public, kind of 4 things that kind of take place to make it work: replicability, searchability, scalability, and persistence. So replicability is that digital objects are infinitely reproducible and exploitable across a range of platforms. So you can, take a photo, you can stick it on Facebook, you can put it on Instagram, and these things can be usable across different places at different times. Searchability. Finished versions of memes as well as raw materials and templates are easily found. So, you can find things very easily. It's not always the case. Some of the kind of platforms have pretty crappy search mechanisms. Instagram, for instance, it's really hard to find stuff sometimes. But, more broadly, the kind of old adage here is that, like, once something's on the internet, it's on there permanently, which while it might mean that you can't always find it that easily, you should be able to find it in the end. And that relates to the notions of persistence. And individual objects may not last as long as analog objects. They are infinitely transferable and storable in many locations. Particularly with the invention of screenshots, things that are deleted now are often still being recorded. So, again, the adage here is that, like, once something's on the web, it's always on the web. Importantly, with the network public thing, though, there's this kind of notion of scalability that kind of brings those 3 things of replication, searchability, and persistence together. So here, digital objects are created for a particular audience, but with the knowledge that they can spread to an unknowably large audience whenever the internet is available. So kind of, the way the things spread around here is like that they can kind of reach millions of people all at once, going viral, is a kind of the kind of term for that these days. So, and it's interesting of what can go viral, like little kind of memes. That kind of cat down there is like almost instantly familiar for everyone now. To more kind of misinformation about public events or whatever, or real information. So there's a kind of hard to follow logic with what can go viral, what does go viral, and what scales. But the internet means that really, again, for the first time in human history, virtually, the majority of the world can find out about things all at once, in real time, across time and space. So, the meme is a kind of key example of the way that kind of this network logic works. And memes here have become a kind of quite broad understanding. They're not just kind of photos with captions or GIFs that kind of change into other things. Meme was originally created by Richard Dawkins to talk about the notions of culture, and it's been kind of imported into thinking about the online world. So meme is an image or a kind of object that is copied and spread rapidly by online users. You can see in something like a meme there's opportunities to be creative, to kind of be funny, to be ironic, to satirize, but they're often used also with particular political purposes as well. But the important thing about those particular political purposes is once they maybe escape the context or the scene or the group or the platform that they were kind of intended for, it can kind of go to other places where that context disappears and that meaning may change. So Schiffman, who's written about memes extensively, digital content units with common characteristics created with awareness of each other, then circulated, imitated, and transformed through online networks. Increasingly, as memes have become more normal, people get them and change them and kind of pass them on. They don't just kind of necessarily circulate it now untethered and unchanged. So a meme's essentially a virtually transmitted cultural symbol or social idea. Consuming them often requires awareness of intertextuality. And that intertextuality is kind of the way that various cultural texts require knowledge of other cultural texts to kind of understand them. References are particularly useful. This things like, cartoon shows in particular are good ways to think through intertextuality. The Simpsons or Family Guy are often kind of riffing on other forms of popular culture. They're kind of criticising it, satirising it, or using it and reinventing it. Understanding what's going on there is what intertextuality is. So intertextuality often requires some specific knowledge to understand what the kind of new meme or whatever the new content is. Sociologists and cultural studies and all kinds of different kind of social science people are interested in memes. Of course, they're kind of global. They spread around the world really quickly, and some argue they kind of behave like a virus, traveling quickly from person to person through social media, changing and spreading, and like often being misunderstood or reused in ways that they weren't originally intended to be. So this idea that media is kind of mimetic, memes serve as a form of digital currency for a variety of purposes, and they're kind of therefore inclusive and exclusive. Understanding them might require specific forms of knowledge, and if you don't have that knowledge, you probably won't get what the meme's about. But increasingly, they're seen as kind of the lingua franca of the online world, collectively created, circulated, and transformed in networks across the globe. Anything really can kind of generate memes, from global events to specific social situations in real life that are turned into memes within social groups online. Some of the kind of more famous memes are kind of just photos of like just everyday people going about their day-to-day life that have kind of been turned into something else. You can see the scalability there. The kind of, in that sense, harking back to the stuff on globalization, they kind of can be key lubricators of globalizing processes as different cultures come together, and they're kind of used as a resource to talk to each other. This can open up new forms of political participation, again, both progressive and reactionary, and it's a way that kind of everyday people kind of talk to each other about kind of big, often big global issues. Key technology, digital technology, in that sense, it's kind of been important for the spreading of memes is the GIF. Now, I'm adamant that it's a hard G when you talk about the GIF, not GIF, as some people like to call it. That's GIF there, that's the stuff you clean your bath with, so I always call it GIF. This is an image file format animated by combining several images or frames into a single file, essentially a really kind of short, quick little video. They're often then given captions that make the joke or change the meaning, or in this sense, just a caption of what they're saying, the kind of Gordon Ramsay one here, and then people use it in their own communication purposes. The Gordon Ramsay one there's kind of, will be one that's sent around to kind of, in a chat group or something when someone says something stupid. GIFs here become a form of language, and they tend to be kind of used for kind of amusing, mockery, satirical purposes, wry humour, but like as anything that's kind of good and fun and creative, now being picked up by the advertising industry and are kind of being co-opted and used to sell stuff as well. And again, the kind of GIF is ambivalent in its politics as a kind of technological device. And what they can often do is decontextualize the kind of radical or critical politics out of something and just make it into an aesthetic or an image that kind of takes away that meaning. And there's some links there to some analysis of what I'm talking about here, and I think we talk about it in the book a little bit. The amazing film clip Childish Gambino did about, or Donald Glover did, This Is America, a huge kind of critical thing about gun violence and various cultural aspects of what's going on there in terms of racial politics. But here what you have is kind of like his kind of weird, dancing, kind of decollectualized, kind of made into this image of a kind of funny dancing black man that then can be argued that has kind of correlations to kind of some racial politics that comes out of America. The critical aspect of the song has disappeared and it's turned into this kind of decontextualized image. So the political meaning here has changed from a kind of radical piece of art to maybe what can be used in kind of more racist situations and for racist reasons. So again, the politics of the technology itself is ambivalent. It's therefore the kind of the means to what way people want to use these things in terms of, again, progressive or reactionary, or being nice or being mean or whatever. What level of kind of social interaction we're talking about here relies upon the user doing this and the consumer. So obviously as well, that the kind of way that the internet has become a key aspect of our lives means that things like political activism go on there as well. And there's lots of really interesting examples of this. So throughout the kind of lecture, I tend to be quite critical of these platforms and their kind of control and panopticonic understandings. But, for many people, it's where they go to meet people like themselves. If you're kind of feeling marginalised yourself, there's kind of various spaces that you can meet others around you to kind of get advice, to get help, to create a community. And so here's an example here, that kind of It's Get Better series was uploaded, 15 years ago now, as responses to suicides. Before long, thousands of people were kind of adding their own versions, creating this kind of community for people that were feeling marginalised about their sexuality to get together and understand that there's other people like you that are going through these kind of things. They kind of act then as a kind of broad political kind of online meme, and the way that they're kind of used by people kind of deliberately trying to help others like them out. There's a link here to kind of to that content if you want to have a look at it. A similar example done by some colleagues in Australia is the Scrolling Beyond Binary as a project exploring social media use about LGBTQI youth. Again, there's a link there in the lecture notes if you want to go and check out that research. Another interesting version of it was the terrorist attack that happened in London a few years back, where a man kind of yelled as the kind of terrorist was being detained by police, "You ain't no Muslim, bruv." This is a Muslim bystander talking to a Muslim person who just committed the violence, and the phrase that came out of this video that kind of went viral, the hashtag, becomes a way to people kind of communicate around this topic online, and was particularly prominent on Twitter there for a while. Many began tweeting the phrase as a rallying cry to kind of for more moderate Muslims to kind of, talk about how like the way that when there's a terrorist attack, all Muslims are kind of labelled as terrorist, and to argue against that kind of terrible stereotyping. So the day after attack, for instance, it was used 56,000 times. 3 days after, 120,000. It's trending on Facebook and other kind of social medias for days. Again, there's a link there to the media story if you want to learn about that example some more. So kind of pointing out some kind of more progressive stuff there, but it's not always progressive. There's reactionary and manipulative and violent aspects of it as well. The Cambridge Analytica scandal, I think, is a particularly prevalent one. It almost seems a little bit naive, I think, compared to what's going on in the White House today. But there's also, active use of memes by the alt-right, Peppy the Frog and that kind of stuff. Specific manipulation of social media sites to try and affect the information people have about candidates, or, to influence their voting. This was particularly been well analysed in the US elections. So again, if you're interested in those kind of more negative kind of consequences, there's some links there. You can read about some stories about that as well. Okay, so I'll leave part 3 there and come back to some broad analysis of platform capitalism.